Hey girl, my name is Anel. Welcome to the Brave and Her podcast, where we inspire, empower, and motivate by sharing our stories of bravery. I strongly believe that by sharing our stories, we open ourselves to healing, but also serve to give hope and inspiration to those who are dealing with a tough situation. We will talk about all topics under the sun. Now let's hear your stories of bravery. Thank you for being here in this episode. I have Krysta Amos. She is a friend of mine, and she's here to have a conversation about being a step-parent. Hi, Krysta. How are you?
Hi, Anel. I'm good. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm excited that you're here, and thank you for being willing to talk about being a step parent. I don't think that people really talk about it or acknowledge step parents as, an important role in kids' lives.
Totally. I think I didn't really think about it very much until I was becoming a step parent myself.
Yeah, same here. So do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Krysta Amos, and like Anel said, we've been friends for a little while and still getting to know each other better. But one of the things that we've most connected on is being both of us stepmoms. So I've been a stepmom almost 3 years, as far as that's when I got married. But before that, I dated my husband for a couple of years and got to know his daughter over that time. So she's now almost 13. So I've had kind of the late elementary and the beginning junior high years with her so far.
The tough years.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
So I guess we'll start with the question. And so my first question is, what has your experience been as a stepmom?
Like a big question. It's so broad. It's been good and different than what I expected being a stepmom to be like. So kind of, I guess, rewinding, I mentioned that I met my stepdaughter when my husband and I were dating. We probably didn't meet for like 6 months to kind of just make sure he and I were going to be a stable thing. And then I got to meet her and really focused on being her friend, and we would find fun activities that would help us to just connect more easily with each other. And so in that period of time, I thought like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. I'm great with kids. I was caregiving and being a babysitter to other kids who were her age and had a lot of experience. But I realized pretty quickly in dating that like that role is really unique from other relationships that I've had with kids. So it's been just a season of years of getting to know each other and kind of figuring out what that role would look like for our unique family.
Yeah, for me, actually my stepdaughter is around the same age, or the same age as your stepdaughter. She's going to be 13 this November. And for me, it's been a challenge being a stepmom. But I've been in her life since she was maybe like 9 months or something.
Wow.
So very young. And
and even that, knowing each other for that long, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge because my husband and I raised her a certain way in our home, and then she goes to her mom, and then she's being raised differently there. I think that's where the challenge is.
Yeah, we experienced that too, and just the the things that are kind of out of our control, and it feels like it's always a lot of things out of my control. I think I like sometimes view myself as like, oh, I'm like the most sidelined parent, not on purpose, but because our daughter spends the most time at her mom's house, and then she is with us some of the time, and then in that my husband is still like the primary parent because he has known her a lot longer. And I imagine can still be that way in your home, even though you guys have known each other so much longer too.
Yeah, normally if she needs something or question or something, she goes to her dad. but I'm very hands-on too, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one that's always involved in making sure she's doing good in school and communicating
Yeah.
with the teachers and all that stuff. Um, yeah, for many years she was hardly with us.
Mm-hmm.
She was only with us for like every other weekend, and then it changed to every other week.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the past year has been not 100% with us, but she's been living with us and going to her mom's every other weekend. And that has been a little easier
Mm-hmm.
just because, she's longer here and, she lives with us. So now she has to just go by one set of rules instead of rules here and rules at her mom's.
Yeah, you guys can be a little bit more consistent. That's part of the challenge, is feeling like we'll
Yeah.
have a few days in a row. And so by the third day, like, we got it, we're all on the same page. And then that's when she ends up heading back to her mom's. And so then we start over again in a couple of weeks, because we are mostly every other weekend, although we try to spend extra time in between as much as possible.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's the same struggle when she
Mhm.
goes with her mom.
Mhm.
The adjustment part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel for her a lot. I think that's like something I didn't really like have a concept for. I didn't come from a family that was blended. My parents were together my whole life, so I didn't know what it was like to switch homes. And it's not just switching rules. Like, it was so interesting a couple of years ago when we were, I think, right before the pandemic. So she was still pretty young, like 10, maybe 11. Kind of expressing like, oh, well, at this house it's like this, and at this house it's like this. And like, it's hard because it feels different. So one home can feel really lively and a lot of people in it, and another home can feel more quiet, and to just adjust your own mental space. So I've like been learning to kind of just empathize more for her and how much she's having to change every time she changes homes.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I haven't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In our family, we're like, I guess she's bicultural. So on one side, she has a mom who comes from Mexico, and then in our home, my husband and I are both Caucasian. So she is Mexican American and two races. And I think that with that, it comes with a lot of cultural differences, even down to like language and just what our families look like when we get together for a barbecue on our side versus a barbecue on that side. It looks really different for her, and she's still navigating, what do I do in this version of it?
Yeah. She's just getting to know the cultures.
Yeah.
I mean, even for us, we're Hispanic, and her mom is Hispanic too, and she's married to a Hispanic. Even within that, we have different cultures as well.
Yeah, there's diversity everywhere.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what are the stereotypes that you've encountered or heard about being a step parent?
I think being a step parent, especially a stepmom, has a lot of negative connotations in like media, particularly, or like children's stories. There's like this wicked witch. You have Cinderella's bad stepmom, or I
Movies.
don't I don't know what Rapunzel's relationship is with that mom, but it feels like a bad stepmom story. But yeah, I think that the assumption is like, oh, a step parent maybe really just wants to be in relationship with their partner and doesn't want all the other things that come with them. And so like the kids are like, oh, let's cart them off to boarding school and not have them in our lives. um, I don't know, that's kind of what I think of. What about you, Anel?
Yeah, the same thing. I have here in my notes as
Yeah.
Disney, how Disney portrays as the stepmoms as wicked and things like that. But also, like, I don't know. I guess I also had that kind of stereotype before I became a stepmom, that stepmoms didn't really, like you said, they didn't really care for the kid. They just wanted to have the husband, but
Hmm.
not be involved in the kids' life. Even though, like, let's say the kids will come and visit, and but not really be involved.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't see how, like, a person can like marry someone with kids and not be involved in the kids' lives.
Yeah, I don't think that's like anybody that I know, I don't think that's their desire, but I do understand maybe some of the root of it because in my own family, like, oh, it's complicated. Like I am very much the one pursuing my stepdaughter, and it's not very like two-way in our relationship. Like, oh, I know that she loves me and she feels loved by me, but she will still always go to her dad for everything, kind of like what you were saying. So unless I'm taking that proactive step, I think that it could be very much like, oh, she would just be here and we would be just roommates for the weekend that she's here and then she would leave. So I think if in a step parent role, you're willing to like take those steps, it doesn't look like what Disney portrayed. But I think that some people probably it's hard to figure out how to find a connection. Yeah.
Right. And also, I mean, I'm not gonna say it doesn't exist because it does exist. Some women are like that when they become
Mhm.
step parent and they have their own kids. Um,
Right.
I have seen it where they push away the step kids and focus only on their own, blood, right? Their
Yeah.
kids. Um,
Yeah, I guess I don't have that story yet. I don't know what it would feel like for us to have our own kids. And it would feel different, I'm imagine, because you have a different relationship with your own kids and you're like in charge of them the whole time. So then when those inconsistencies happen between two homes, it would
right.
be that much more visible to see like, oh, I can get my kids to do this, but I can't get my stepkids to do this. And that's hard.
Yeah, yeah. And then also because they have the influence of the other parent. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's the parent might not say anything, like, for example, your stepdaughter's mom might not say anything about you and your husband, but there are some step parents, or not step parents, biological parents that may have like some negative uh,
Hmm.
thoughts about the other parent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a reality. It's feels like it's complicated for everybody. I can imagine like if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody else caring for your kid or anybody that you really care about, you're going to be more protective and want them to get the best, but also sometimes we can have a hard it's hard for us to not get into like a petty place of feeling like they
Yeah.
couldn't possibly do everything right and I'm going to judge them for what they're not doing.
Or sometimes jealousy, like maybe,
Hmm.
like having to share your kid, right?
Yeah.
um we've already kind of covered this, but is it hard being a stepmom for you? Has it been hard to be a stepmom?
Yeah, it has been hard. It's of course been rewarding, but um probably at a slower pace of rewarding than I hoped for. um yeah, I feel like even a little emotional thinking of like, oh, it is a hard role to carry. I think there's a like selflessness that it demands um and just like self growth that I didn't I didn't know what was coming. Of course, I knew what I was getting into marrying my husband and feeling like, oh, I know this young girl who I love already, and then feeling like, oh, I wanted it to look one way and it looks a little bit different than what I'd hoped for.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've had similar experience where it's really hard, and it's hard. I don't know for you, but for me, it's hard to like not take certain things personal.
Totally.
um you know Whatever the situation might be, like I oftentimes take it personal, like it's an attack against me. But like you said, it must be really hard for her to go from home to home and adjust.
Yeah. It can feel like you're being rejected more than what you want to be. Nobody likes to feel rejected. And it can feel like, for me, it can feel powerless sometimes as far as like, oh, if I have these like what if scenarios, right? So if I had been raising my stepdaughter like you from this early age, what would look different? Or if we did have our own kids, these are the kinds of ways we would lead our household. But we can't turn back time to change what's kind of already in motion. And so recognizing that and being able to like accept that things are different and then still adjust course to like care for the situation that you're actually in rather than like the what ifs that I can think of. That's been a part of what is hard but also helpful.
I personally think that it it's probably harder, like in your situation where your stepdaughter knew a different life before you and your husband got married, right? So at some point you weren't in the picture yet.
Mm-hmm.
And or I'm not sure if she ever experienced both her parents being together and then experience not being together, and then you come to the picture. In my situation, my stepdaughter doesn't know any better, right?
Right.
My husband and her mom separated when she was not even a month old,
Mm-hmm.
so she doesn't know any better. She doesn't know um her dad and her mom being together ever.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she can remember anything before she was 2, but since we got married when she was 2, so
Uh-huh.
I think all she knows is me and her dad always being
Right.
together.
Yeah.
I think that's a little easier than, let's say, like if she was older and
Mm-hmm.
got married. And
Yeah, she does know a different life. And I think it it doesn't I don't hear her voicing that desire for her parents to be together or things like that now, but I think when we were first dating, some of our drives home to drop her back off to her mom's house, they were full of all these kinds of questions, and it was fun to see her process. But I think I really realized some of what it carried for her when we got married, because the couple of weeks before our marriage, like it was almost like she had a sit down conversation with me and was like, what if we get mad at each other? What's going to happen? What if
Mhm.
my dad doesn't want to spend time with me because he's spending time with you? And so really having to like answer for her what were the hard questions of like, what does it mean that you're going to get married? Because her dad had never been married before and all of that. And then after we were married, I felt like I was um kind of evaluating, like she was young and there were things that she would say that I was questioning, like, did she say that kind of rude thing and mean it, or like, is this just a kid without a filter right now? And I never experienced that before when we were just dating, but after we got married and we moved in together, her life did change significantly. She was now visiting her dad at a different location, and somebody else was always there, not just sometimes there. So she had a lot to like overcome, and it was a lot of change all at once. There were things like, oh, this came from my dad's house, but all these things were not from my dad's house. And she had been to my house, like as we're merging our furniture into a living room, and just kind of like noting and then telling us that she liked her dad's old place better than our new place, and just things that she was processing. It was interesting. But now we've moved again, actually, more recently, and she hasn't said anything like that. I think it's easier. We're not overcoming all of the change all at once the way we were almost 3 years ago.
Right. And maybe it was just her fear of thinking, what she was asking
Yeah.
about. She was worried about her not being able to spend as much time with her dad now
Hmm.
that he was getting married to you.
Yeah. So
That
now we've had 3 years to show her, oh, he still spends a lot of time with you, whether you want it or not sometimes.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, so what makes a good stepmom?
Mm.
Or, what is the role of a stepmom?
Yeah, I think that a stepmom has the opportunity to just be another loving adult in a kid's corner. Um, and because it is different, in some situations, maybe it doesn't feel different for everybody, but it feels different than a biological parent relationship. And to like recognize that that's okay and not try to force it to be something that it's not. I feel like that's the role for a step parent, to kind of discern, well, what is my role? What's my child open to? What can I give? And still be a healthy version of myself, and kind of navigating those things. So a good step parent is paying attention to that. And I think in our case, there's kind of like a flow to things where sometimes my stepdaughter and I are on a really great groove and we're spending a lot of time together and laughing and joking. And other times we're like, oh gosh, like every time she walks in the room, she asks me, where's my dad? I'm like, what am I, chopped liver? So we, like being open to that, and also being willing to like pursue them in that time, because I think that as they're going from home to home, or even if they're not really changing locations, they're still changing emotions and processing things and constantly evaluating, am I okay? Am I loved? What's my parent relationship like with my biological parent as well as with the step parent? So if you can take 3 steps back to kind of view things from their vantage point, and sometimes you're guessing. I don't always know what she's thinking or why a reaction is coming out the way that it is. But when I do that, I start seeing like, oh, I'm caring for her more holistically rather than from a selfish angle of like, I'd really like to receive love and affirmation back from this child who I'm pouring into.
Yeah, I feel the same way. First of all, they're going through emotions right now and hormones and all that stuff.
The age, my goodness.
Yeah, um, for my stepdaughter, it started like when she was maybe 10 or 11.
Uh-huh. Yep,
Um,
right around the same time.
and so it's just getting a little harder and harder, but I'm hoping and trusting that it's going to change once she starts high school, because they
Yeah,
said that the hardest years is middle school.
yeah.
But yeah, I was just gonna say that I feel the same way sometimes. Like I pour so much, but then sometimes I feel like not appreciated for
Mhm.
everything that I do for her.
Yeah, it can feel that way.
I don't know, about having a biological or not, because I don't have one.
Right.
But I do see her as if she was mine. Like, yes, I know, I didn't birth her, but I feel like I'm, always there for her as if she was mine. Like I through, good and bad, and always make
Absolutely.
sure that she's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what advice would you give to like a newly stepmom, or someone that's dating a person with that already has kids, or someone that is going to be marrying someone with kids?
Got it. I think one thing that has been most helpful to me has been finding other people who are also step parents, because it feels like they're the only people that can really understand what it's like to be in your same shoes. So like talking with you and now, like we've connected several times over the last couple of years of like, oh yeah, this and because our stepdaughters are the same age, there is like an extra connection of like, oh yep, they're at this age and they're getting phones, and what does that look like in our home? So that, and I found that there's a lot more step parents who are naturally in my like social circle in my community than what I realized. So people, again, like it just wasn't really on my radar before becoming a step parent. But as I became a step parent and like slowly voiced like, oh, this is happening and I don't really know what to do with that, then I found more people like, oh yeah, well, when my stepdaughter was this, or when we first got married, and seeing people who are further along in their journey of step parenting has been such an encouragement to both my husband and I, like getting to talk to other people and that. So I think that's my like biggest piece of advice. I've also found like there's a couple of Facebook groups and an Instagram account that I follow that are other step moms talking about their experience. And sometimes like you, when we were talking about the connotations of stepmoms, I definitely see some of that come to life in the like Facebook groups. There is some pettiness or hard things, but I also feel like it's the open forum for people to just like process and say, here's the ugly side of me that I'm feeling right now. And then to have other stepmoms like across the country who you don't know share like, oh yeah, that's hard. Maybe you should approach it this way, or here's what worked for my stepdaughter. And that's been really cool. And then it's validating to hear other people who are like, this is like, oh, this is an unfair way that stepmoms are treated or underappreciated. And so then they can appreciate each other.
Yeah. Um, I have to get that username earned so I can
Yes.
do that. Because let me tell you, so I don't know if you've ever encountered this, but or you experience this with your husband, but sometimes I would say things and some people would say, oh, that's because you're a stepmom, you're not the biological kid. But then when I speak to other moms, I'm part of the moms group at church, and I'm talking to them, they're like, no, that's normal. Or I hear them talk and how they express sometimes about their kids. It's like, well, if I would have said that, oh, God forbid, like I say that because I'm the step parent. I don't have the voice or the
Right.
authority to say that about my step kid. But if I was a biological mom, then, I,
Yes.
I would be allowed to say that.
The Instagram account that, yeah, the one that I follow, she uses a lot of memes that are like about moms, like whatever. And it's like usually acknowledging like, oh, the crazy things that moms go through and like how whatever they say to their kids. And she always like crosses off mom and puts stepmom and says like, there, I fixed it, because she's validating that like it is the same experience, even if they're not our biological children. And it's helpful to like have people, even if they're online, helping you see like, oh yeah, I'm not crazy. This is a weighted role that's very important in my life as well as in the life of my stepdaughter.
Yeah, because essentially, I'm not saying like I've always said it since day one. Like I'm not replacing your mom. You have a
Right.
mom, but I'm kind of like your mom here at our house, right?
Yes.
I'm like a mom, not your mom.
Yes.
So I think we should be treated just like the mom,
We're
right?
doing the work of moms.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, what were we saying before I said that?
I don't
Oh,
know. Do you have other advice or what's been helpful?
I was gonna say don't do it, but
I know. I think it's more like, not that you shouldn't do it, but like, don't do it and think it's not going to be a big deal, because it is a big commitment.
yeah. Yes, exactly. I was gonna say like don't don't do it. Like please don't like move forward with someone that has kids and you don't plan to be involved in those kids' lives.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, who is, hurting is the kids and, no one else.
Yeah. And it's naive to think that the person you love, your partner, is ever going to like be satisfied not having a really significant relationship with their kids. Like,
Yeah.
you have to know that this is the most important thing in their life. And if they're one of the most important things in your life, then their children are going to be in yours as well.
Yeah, I agree. So lastly,
Mhm.
do you have a Bible verse, song, word, or poem that keeps you going on those tough days that you feel like giving up? Like,
Um, the what came to mind when you asked that question is kind of this little phrase that I feel like God has whispered to me over the years. So it's not necessarily a verse, but just the idea that love initiates, and by initiates, like takes the first step. So in those moments where like it's hard to be reminded that like, oh, if I'm talking about love, then like it's going to take the initiating step. I'm going to take that first step and approach my stepdaughter or my husband. And and sometimes we, in the thick of things, it's a burden on my husband too. And I can recognize that. And so there's seasons where he's like so committed and he's calling my stepdaughter every single night to like talk with her about her day and homework and make sure she's okay. sending her Uber Eats after school, or different like ways that he's finding ways to connect with her when she's not just in our home. And then something might happen where, you know, she didn't really appreciate all of the work that he's been doing. And then he kind of gets into a rut and he's like, oh, this is like a bummer. I'm not going to try tomorrow. Like, I'm tired. And then to be able to like be his partner and aside on his side and say like, oh, like, no, or maybe I take a turn that time, so that our stepdaughter isn't feeling the like lapse in any of that, that she's the child and we get to be mature parents together, like recognizing like, oh, love is always going to make that first step regardless of how we're being treated.
Yeah. And, you know, it's something that I have to remind myself too, but they're preteens, you know?
Yes. Yeah. So this is happening with their biological moms too.
Yeah. They're going through like so many hormones. Like it could just be like a switch, like 1 second they're fine. And then you might say something that just triggers them. And all of a sudden they don't want to hang out with you, or they just want to be in their phone or in their room or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
That's just this teenagers.
It's true.
Well, thank you so much for being open and talking about this, you know, being a stepmom. I know sometimes it's hard. It's really hard. And just, you know, I just want to say like, keep going. And even though right now it might not seem like it's being recognized, you know, later on you'll see the fruits of it.
We will. Same to you. And now like we're in it together with these beautiful daughters who are maturing and figuring out who they are in the world too.
We should have them meet.
That would be really fun. Let's do it.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode inspired you. If you like this podcast, please share on social media and tag me on Instagram @TheBravenHug. I would love to hear your stories of bravery.